what I recommend is that to have your parents covered in a separate policy and you covered in a separate policy. There are two important reasons for this. One is that the premium typically gets calculated on the eldest member. So you will have a cost inefficient kind of a product where the eldest member in your family, let's say your father or your mother, is going to define what premium you will pay. For someone who's 30-year-old and who's wanting to cover their family members, they have to cover themselves for, let's say, till 80. They have to cover for 50 years. So 50 years of healthcare inflation has to be calculated. But always understand that health insurance is a 5 lakh cover over multiple number of years. So it's a mathematical calculation in my view, which you should take. And it's also about affordability. If you have a 5 lakh cover and you think that over multiple number of years, if there are multiple 5 lakh hospitalizations that happen and you have enough wealth to be able to pay that, then it makes sense to not have a cover. Typically recommend a minimum cover. The minimum cover that a 30-year-old individual should have, in my view, is between 20 to 25 lakhs per adult. So if there are, let's say, a family of two and both are adults, they are husband wife, then they should buy a 50 lakh cover. That is the minimum cover that I recommend. The maximum cover, it will depend upon the affordability of that person.
Hospitals charge more, unnecessarily give you some treatment.
Welcome to another edition of This or That. This is Bhartendra saying. Today we continue our discussion with Mr. Mahavir Chopra. In our last discussion, we covered nuances of insurance. Today he will guide us how to buy health insurance.
Mahavir, just help us, you can call it a guidance on buying health insurance.
Right.
Okay? There is family floater.
Mm-hmm.
There is health insurance requirement for parents.
Right.
Okay? There is health insurance for single people. So first question is, how should parents' policy and our policy should be combined or should be separate?
Right. Yeah. So typically what I recommend is that to have your parents covered in a separate policy and you covered in a separate policy. So your immediate family should be covered in a separate policy. There are two important reasons for this. One is that the premium typically gets calculated on the eldest member. So you will have a cost inefficient kind of a product where the eldest member in your family, let's say your father or your mother, is going to define what premium you will pay. Right? So that does not typically make sense. So even if you do a calculation, it will basically, from a cost point of view and cost optimization point of view, it will not make sense. The second is basically that the risks that your parents would have in terms of the amount of times they may need hospitalization could be very different from your need for hospitalization because you're significantly younger than them, right? And hence decoupling them and having separate covers are important because if they end up using a large amount of the cover that you have as a pool in a floater, then you may have no cover, right? Because at that point in time, they may have used the cover, and if there is a certain month or year where you also want to use the cover in the same year, then there could be an issue because they have a higher risk. So it's important that you basically include them as a separate cover and your family as a separate cover. And there is a third one. The third one is slightly not something that a lot of people would have imagined to be a situation, is that the cover that you need is higher than the cover that your parents need, right? Because we're talking about number of years remaining in your life, right? So for someone who's 30-year-old and who's wanting to cover their family members, they have to cover themselves for, let's say, till 80. They have to cover for 50 years. So 50 years of healthcare inflation has to be calculated when you're calculating coverage. For someone who's already 60, for them, let's say if you're taking at the same age of 80, 20 years of healthcare inflation needs to be calculated. So आज 5 लाख का cover enough है. तो 5 लाख के ऊपर आप inflation 20 साल का लगाओगे तो what is the cover that will come? And compare that to 5 lakh ka cover enough for someone who's, let's say, 30. But you're putting inflation, multiply compounding inflation of, let's say, 5% also over 50 years. It's going to be a much significant higher cover that you need. So coverage requirement is also going to be different. So these 3-4 things are very important, and hence having a separate cover is going to work better.
How do you go about policy for your parents? Because it's extremely expensive. Is it really worth it, or rather I save some money and do it? Because if you try and buy a policy for senior citizen, it's extremely expensive.
Yeah, meaning I think the way to look at this is is to do a cost benefit kind of an analysis. Typically, I feel the premium that someone needs to be paying for senior citizens would be in the range of around 10% to 15% of the coverage amount. I'm just giving a ballpark number. People should not write in comments कि ऐसे ज़्यादा होता है because आते हैं ऐसे comments. But I'm just saying that ऐसे है. But I'm saying that if that is the premium, let's say 10% to 15%, which basically means is that 6 to 10 times in 6 to 10 times in 6 to 10 years you may end up using the sum insured once, right? That is the broad calculation. So you should look at it that way, in my view, that यार 10% प्रीमियम पे कर रहा हूँ, 10 साल के लिए मुझे इतना कवर मिल रहा है, एक बार भी पूरा सम इंश्योर्ड यूज़ हो गया, इट्स गोइंग टू टेक केयर ऑफ व्हाट प्रीमियम आई एम गोइंग टू पे, सो आई एम गोइंग टू ब्रेक इवन. So it's a good thing to take. But let's say your premium is coming to 40% and it's coming for certain people, right? Meaning where they've crossed 75, 80. I recently spoke to someone who's a friend's friend and the premium, the coverage was coming to around 27, the coverage to premium was coming to around 27, 28%. And I spoke to him and I said that at the age that your mom is, she is 80 plus, she may not even go for a surgery. Like doctors typically recommend again surgeries after a certain age because of the fragile nature of the body, not being able to accept a surgery, right? So you not need a surgery also in a large number of chances that it happens. Plus the cover is very low. Like it was a 2 lakh cover and it was costing some random number amount of cover. So we dropped from that. I asked him to drop from that policy. Also it had a room rent limit, which was saying that okay, you can take a room of only 2,000 rupees and they live in Bombay. I said, you're not going to get anything out of your cover. You'll get 35-40% of the claim amount or the bill amount. So looking at all these things, we decided not to take it. So it's a mathematical calculation where you are taking a call based on the probability of hospitalizations that could happen and take a call. There has been a reverse example also of another friend who I met on Twitter and then now we are in touch otherwise also. And that person basically had a similar thing, but it was 15%. So I gave him this calculation on Twitter only, saying that 6 महीने में अगर एक बार hospitalization होगा, तो it will take care of it. So I think you should continue. And next year he had an hospitalization for his mother that way, and it took care of the hospitalization. So it's a mathematical calculation in my view, which you should take, and it's also about affordability. If you have a 5 lakh cover, and you think that over multiple number of years, if there are multiple 5 lakh hospitalization that happened and you have enough wealth to be able to pay that, then it makes sense to not have a cover. But always understand that health insurance is a 5 lakh cover over multiple number of years. So let's say if I use 5 lakh this year and I pay my premium again, it again starts giving me 5 lakh cover next year. A lot of people who do this fund calculation, they look at it कि मेरे 5 लाख का corpus बनाना है, right? And then they make a 5 lakh corpus. But health insurance is not comparable because it's a 5 lakh reinstatable cover over the lifetime of that family member, whoever you're covering. So it's, let's say 20 years of lifetime is remaining, 5 lakh into 20 ka cover hai wo. Versus this is a 5 lakh corpus. Then you need to build at least half of that as a corpus for your family member. So those kind of calculations need to be done when you're deciding to become an insurer yourself. Basically you're becoming an insurer yourself, right? मीनिंग आप बोल रहे हो कि मैं मेरा फंड मैनेजमेंट खुद करूँगा, माई वेल्थ विल टेक केयर ऑफ द हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन, सो आई एम बिकमिंग एन इंश्योरर फॉर माई फैमिली and I will take care of it myself. I don't need
then
an
it's on
insurance
affordability, whether you can afford
it. It comes upon affordability, probability, and the mathematical calculation that I mentioned. That way.
So talking about health insurance for a younger family.
Yeah.
What are the things that you should consider to say that this should be there in terms of total sum assured?
Right.
And what are the features you should consider?
Yeah. So the first thing is always, if you're, let's look at a person who's 30-year-old, right, as the person who's buying this policy. The person when he's at 30 or let's say a little higher than 30, that is the age when they should start planning for a cover for their old age and not take a cover for their current situation, right? That is the most important thing or a takeaway that I would give in this conversation that I am having with you. The reason being is that let's say at 32, 35, 36, any family member has a disease or a condition, they may not get the upgrade that they feel they would have got later. Right? So मैं चालू कर रहा हूँ 30 में, I say that 10 लाख तो बहुत है, मतलब मैं क्या ही होने वाला है मुझे. And then I keep that 10 lakhs till I'm 40. And before 40, let's say कोलेस्ट्रॉल हो गया और थायराइड डायबिटीज़ हो गया, जो भी हो गया, 2-3 diseases have happened for some reason, right? And the current lifestyle that we live, it's quite a possibility. From that perspective, it could be difficult that you may get an upgrade from that same policy, because you'll buy a comprehensive policy at the age of 30. That insurance company may deny you a cover upgrade when you need it. And hence, buying a large coverage at the age of 30, which takes care of you at 55, 60, is very, very important. So that is the coverage calculation that you should do. So let's say typically the calculation that we do is 10 lakhs ka cover hai, that is good enough for you today, or 5 lakhs ka cover is good enough for you today. You are 30 and you are, let's say, looking at covering yourself for the real hospitalizations, the large significant ones would come at 60. तो अगर 5 लाख आज इनफ है, 60 में कितना होगा? And if you take a 10% inflation and calculate that coverage amount, typically would come to around 20-25 lakhs for an individual to take a cover. So that's what we typically recommend as the minimum cover that you should have, right? So that is the first thing. Second is, coverage is something which is very important, but there are certain things that could degrade your cover, which are basically limitations in the policy, right? There are limitations in the policy that you should be aware of. So one of the limitations in the policy could be limits on coverages for specific diseases having specific cover, right? So for example, certain policies could say that for cardiac surgery, even if you have a 10 lakh cover, for cardiac surgery, I'll pay only 2 lakhs.
Okay.
Or for cataract surgery, I'll pay only 48,000 rupees.
Specific disease limits.
Okay. Specific disease-wise limits or specific treatment-wise limits could be there in the policy. So that needs to be taken care of, because that is your effective coverage for that disease actually then. You may have taken a 10 lakh cover, but if you have a 48,000 rupees limitation for cataract per eye, then you cannot claim 10 lakhs. You can claim only 48,000 rupees, right? So that's something that you need to understand. So it turns out to be your effective coverage for that specific disease. So that's something that you need to get a good clarity on. Then there are certain other terms and conditions that are very important. Like for example, there is something called daycare hospitalization, right, which is becoming very prevalent because of the advancement in medical science, right, where hospitalizations get concluded in the same day, right? You don't even have to stay overnight, right? Where for example, heart surgeries are now happening where if you take away the recovery part, the person actually can be discharged in the same day, right, or less than 24 hours. And there are so many other surgeries that you and I know, kidney stone and those kind of things, where you can be discharged in the same day. Now, a lot of insurance companies have a list of daycare hospitalizations that they cover, and a lot of companies say that all daycare hospitalizations are covered. So go for things which are giving you an open and wide cover and not restricting you to a list. That is very important, right? So these kind of things you need to look at. These fine prints are something that you need to look at, where your coverage could get restricted.
Any
right?
specific exclusion that I should be worried about, that I should take a look at in the policy?
Yeah, so there are like 3-4 exclusions in a health insurance policy which people should be knowing about. The most important one for younger individuals is a 2-year waiting period for specified diseases, which basically has nothing to do with whether you had that disease when you basically bought the policy or not. They basically say that first 2 years I'm not going to pay you for these diseases. Like for example, it would include kidney stone, it would include let's say piles, it would include slip disc and those kind of things, where they do not pay you for the first 2 years. So if you have a surgery or a treatment to be done in the first 2 years, they will not pay you. So that's something that you should know. Apart from that, there are 3-4 other exclusions that people should know. Permanent exclusions भी होते हैं health insurance में. For example, the most of the mainstream policies do not cover you for maternity, right? But there are certain policies which could cover you for maternity after a couple of years of waiting, right? Then there are exclusions in health insurance which would say that hospitalizations which are purely for monitoring purposes, hospitalizations which are there for just observation, right, where you are in the hospital just for observation, or for diagnostic purposes where you are just getting someone hospitalized for certain period of time because you want to get some tests done. That is not covered under health insurance, right? Cosmetic surgeries are not covered under health insurance. Like for example, a nose job or hair weaving is not covered under health insurance. If I want to get I want to do away with my spectacles, if I want to do a LASIK surgery, typically is not covered under health insurance, apart from, let's say, if it is almost blinding me, like it's typically 7.5 diopter and above, right? So they say that above that, I will cover you in that policy. So those are exclusions in the policy. So that you should look at. Apart from that, there are 2-3 more things. One of the things is that look at the track record of the insurance company, before you decide a health insurance. So there are 3-4 things that you should look at when you're looking at track record of an insurance company. One of which is basically what I typically ask people to look at is claims settled in 30 days. Right? How many number of claims the insurance company got, percentage of claims that they settled in 30 days.
Where do you get this data?
This data is available on insurance company websites. For each insurance company, there is something called public disclosures. You can click that and it will open up a kind of a PDF file. In that, it is mentioned. We consolidate this on our platform. So if someone wants to look at it and compare it multiple insurance company wise, they can look at it on Beshak that way. And we do this on a regular basis. We update it on a regular basis on our platform that way. So this tells you that how efficient is an insurance company to settle claims at the speed that you would expect. Right? So typically 30 days, if 95% claims are getting settled, it's reasonable. But if it's saying 85% claims are getting settled, then and you're comparing these two companies, 95 and 85, then you know that this company is more efficient. Right? That is one comparison that you can do. The other is complaints ratio. So you get a complaints ratio, that how many complaints that insurance company get over the number of claims that it made, the customers made over a period of time. This tells you about the dissatisfaction percentage, or it's a metric of dissatisfaction that customers are facing, because and then you get to compare it over multiple insurance companies, right? So you get to know that, okay, the average that you're seeing is, let's say, X number, and this company has more, then you can typically maybe rule out that company in your decision making. So these are some metrics that typically are worth looking at. That is the one thing. Apart from this, there are two more things. One is that ensure that proposal form is filled properly, because all study that you do, all the mehnat that you do to find the right product, if you don't fill the declaration form, the proposal form right, then you may have the best product in the market, but it will not work when the claims come, because the insurance companies basically find out this at the time of claims and typically reject your claim, even cancel your policy. So proposal form is kind of something that you should be super serious about. Just don't sign at the crosses that your agent tells you to sign it. Fill it very seriously. Or if your agent is filling it, ensure that you've read everything is complete before you sign it that way. And the last one, which is equally important as compared to all the points that we have mentioned, is ensure that you have someone on your side who's like an expert, right? Someone who knows the industry, someone who's seen the insurance industry over a multiple number of years to know how it works, and who knows how claims are paid, what are the problems that can occur, what are the pitfalls about health insurance or term insurance, and then guide you through how to choose the product, how to buy the product, how to fill the proposal form, how to ensure you maintain your policy, how to upgrade, how to make claims, if there is a dispute, how to fight those claims. So having spent X amount of time in finalizing a policy, finalizing an insurer, you should spend equal amount of time to find the right person to be on your side, who's like an expert to take care of your policy whenever you need it.
Health insurance we buy because we want to protect our savings and everything. So how do we ensure that in case of any event where money is needed, that entire processing is cashless?
Yeah.
So is there anything specific I can do?
Yeah. For it to be cashless, you'll have to basically reach out to a cashless hospital, right? Meaning hospital which is, not cashless hospital. You'll have to reach out to a hospital which is in the network of the insurance company.
I need to ensure that I'm going to the hospital which is network in the insurance.
Yeah. So the easiest hack for this is that whenever you're buying a health insurance policy, you can basically first list down the typical hospitals, the large, the medium, and the small hospitals that you usually or your family would visit, right? And find out whether they are covered under the cashless network of the insurance company. It is a dynamic list. It can change, but it is at least a proxy value for you to understand the quality of the network for you to take a decision. So that's how you can basically look at it. First, meaning being proactive about it. And when you are actually, someone is getting hospitalized and you need to find out, then if it's a planned hospitalization, then you can obviously look at the chart at that time. The insurance company's website have the list of network hospitals. You can choose a hospital which has cashless and then basically process it with that. Basically go ahead and get the treatment done in that specific hospital.
So if I've read the proposal, I've read the policy properly, I filled the form properly, I declared everything properly, is there any chance that my claim will still get rejected?
So then if you've done your job right, meaning there are only 2-3 things that could happen where your claim could get rejected, is that specific disease is excluded, right? Meaning for that period of time. There could be an exclusion in your policy because of which the claim could get rejected. Second is that there is some misunderstanding between you and the insurance company, where the insurance company has taken a call that you did not mention A thing or B thing. Like we spoke about it, right? The age difference in an earlier conversation that we had. And then that may require a little bit of back and forth between you and the insurance company to prove that whatever is the insurance company's apprehension is wrong, right? So that kind of friction could be there. Apart from that, the third could be typically that the insurance company, you've ended up buying an insurance from a policy from an insurance. Ended up buying a policy from an insurance company which is basically become notorious, right? Meaning they've started rejecting claims right, left, and center, and that has happened over the last 7-8 years. I'm seeing that happening. That's basically very important to understand that and keep a tab on it, because if you find that happening, it's better to port your policy to another insurance company and then to be in an insurance policy, to be in a company, have your cover in a policy where you know that there is this a lot of air that is around it, that there are a lot of random rejections that are happening. It's not very easy, whatever I just mentioned, and that's why an expert helps at such kind of situation, who would know this because he's part of the industry. And if they are really professional, they will tell you that its time has come to move out of this insurance company. Yeah, and the fourth one is basically that there is some kind of track record change that has happened with a specific insurance company, right? And we've seen this happening a couple of times where there's a management change, or an insurance company has probably got a change of, let's say, probably got listed, right? And that has resulted in suddenly a lot of new cases or new stories that are getting heard about random rejections that insurance company is making, right? This is something that if you have an expert, that expert would have a tab on, right? Meaning they would see it across multiple number of customers that they are serving, right? Or a community, if they are, like in our case, in case of Beshak, we have a community of experts who talk to each other, and that's why when they talk to each other, they come to know that, okay, this is what's happening, and they form a view about it, that, okay, this company is not as good as it was maybe 5 years ago, so it's time to port, right? So that kind of a decision can be taken. And for people who have bought a policy and they have the right, hand holding available from a professional, it could be an insurance company, it could be an institution, it could be a professional expert like we basically talk about. That person can ensure that they know how to represent that case and fight it out, maybe through, let's say, the grievance forums that are available, or go to the ombudsman, or even go to court and ensure that the claim gets paid. So essentially the question that you asked is that मैंने सब कुछ सही किया तो भी मेरा claim reject हो सकता है क्या? तो ये 2-3 चीज़ें हैं which I said. Exclusion हो सकता है, insurance company has some clarifications that are required, and the third is basically where the insurance company has gone little bad, right? In all these situations, meaning having an expert on your side can basically take care of this to a large extent, is what I would say, because it's typically very difficult for a person who's not from the space, and in fact people from the space also I have seen, for them to be able to keep a tab on all the stuff that I mentioned.
So last 2 questions.
Sure.
One is that, does it make sense to have multiple health insurance policy?
Mm-hmm.
And second part of this question is that, should I top up my corporate health insurance policy?
Right. So multiple health insurance policies, if I am understanding it right, is the reason why you're saying multiple health insurance policies to de-risk कि एक company ने नहीं दिया तो दूसरी company देगा. My suggestion would be not to do that, meaning it's better to find the right insurance company and then buy a good coverage from that same insurance company. You could probably have multiple insurance policies if you are looking at saving some money by, let's say, breaking your policy into 2 policies by buying something which is called a super top-up, which is like an extension to your existing policy. That is possible. But apart from that, I would not put like putting all eggs in one basket does not really make sense in health insurance and term insurance. In fact, term insurance, a lot of people ask this question, where they say that I'm buying a 5 crore cover, should I buy 2.5? right? Meaning so that
No, it may also happen like this. Let's say I bought a policy for 2 crore rupees when I was 30. Now I'm 45. My income has increased. So I want to buy another policy.
Yes.
So then I should buy it from the same company, or is it okay to buy from another company?
It's fine. You should do a agnostic kind of an analysis. It does not matter whether it's with the same company or the other company. The essential rule of the game is to ensure that you're buying right coverage and you are basically following the rules, which is basically you are filling the proposal form right, you're making the right declaration, and you know the terms and conditions of the policy. It does not matter if you're doing it from the same company or not. The only advantage that you would have if you buy from the same company is that the claims process could be simpler because you'll have to submit forms, submit papers to only one company. That is the only advantage that you have in term insurance. In case of health insurance, I would recommend that you should never try to split your policy because splitting your policy basically is an unnecessary hassle. Buying it right and buying from one company is much better.
We didn't answer that. Should I top up my corporate policy?
You can. So technically you can. And a lot of people feel that, who know very clearly that they are going to work with large companies who are always going to give them a health insurance coverage. For them, it does make sense to basically have a top up over their corporate policy. The only hitch in this is that the corporate policies are typically getting, for a lack of a better word, they are the quality of the coverage is going down with corporate policies is what I see. So typically, let's say if a company is offering, let's say a 5 lakh cover, the 5 lakh cover earlier, let's say was comprehensive, but now it has a room rent limit. It probably has co-pays. It has a network hospital limit, or it has co-pays if you go out of the network and get treated. A lot of cost management is done by the CFO of your employer to ensure that, the premiums remain in budget. And that could impact you basically when a claim comes, right? I mean, let's say you're basically depending on your employer for 5 lakhs coverage and you're buying a super top up over that. It makes sense, but that 5 lakh effective coverage because of the room rent limit, because of surgery limits that we spoke about, or there could be basically co-sharing of the claim kind of a things, could be much lower than 5 lakhs. And then you could have an out of pocket. So understand the cover that you have and understand that this could change over years also. Like this year, the company has got a good premium quote from the insurance company. So they've got a good plan. Like this year, and the company also has budget. Next year, for some reason, the company does not have budget, right? Or the premiums have gone above budget because of multiple claims that happened previous year. The CFO could decide that, okay, I cannot pay more premium. Let me dilute the coverage. And then you would pay for it, right? So it's your healthcare, but the decisions are taken by someone else. Are you okay with that? For that 5 lakh coverage is the decision that you need to take, right? Are you okay with the coverage being yours, but the decision of the coverage being with someone else is the call that you need to take.
So Mahavir, one question that I have, just a concluding remark, what is the ideal health insurance amount cover I should take?
Yeah.
And advice for health insurance.
Yeah. So I would typically recommend a minimum cover. I don't recommend the ideal cover. I'll tell you why. The minimum cover that a 30-year-old individual should have, in my view, is between 20 to 25 lakhs per adult. So if there are, let's say, a family of 2 and both are adults, they are husband wife, then they should buy a 50 lakh cover. That is the minimum cover that I recommend. The maximum cover, it will depend upon the affordability of that person and how much they think that they want a coverage for. Like typically, let's say I am looking at also having cover for being able to get hospitalized outside India. Then I may need maybe a 3-4 crore cover, right? But let's say I am okay with being hospitalized in India and being always hospitalized in the cheapest private room in even when I grow at 60, I grow to 60. Then maybe I need a lesser cover than the person who's wanting to get hospitalized abroad, right? So minimum cover is 25 lakh per adult, 20 to 25 lakh per adult. Maximum is something that you should try to stretch as much as you can based on your affordability. No cover, in my view, is going to be a high cover because we are talking about a 30-year horizon or a 50-year horizon. We don't know how medical science is going to progress. We saw during COVID that randomness can go to any level, right? And we know that we are not living very healthy lifestyles. And we don't know what is going to be the kharcha, the inflation over so much period of time, specifically in a country like India, where we are not seeing governments really spending on healthcare. Right? We don't see, we are one of the lowest spending, the government, India is one of the countries where government spends the lowest on healthcare over GDP. Right? So we don't have an option outside private hospitals to go to. Private hospitals are on their own and they are charging based on whatever they want to charge, and because there's no regulation on pricing, and hence there is no end to what they can charge over the longer period of time. Understanding all this is very important when you decide the coverage. And based on all this, whatever gives you good sleep at night is the cover that you should take above 25 lakh.
Do hospitals charge more or unnecessarily give you some treatment if they know you have a medical insurance?
So there are two perspectives to this question. One of it is, if I have to give a blanket response to this, usually I have seen that hospitals do charge more to patients who have insurance. They do it in two ways. Like smaller hospitals basically hike the rates and charge more. They will just increase the charges because maybe they do not have a fixed rate in the billing software that they use. And larger hospitals, I have seen that they do over treatment. Right? I have had an example in my own family where my father had to go. I went through a CT scan one day for his stomach, and next day he went through a sonography for the stomach. And I asked this question to the doctor that, hey, you've already done a CT scan, and CT scan is supposed to be more advanced than sonography. Why are you doing a sonography? So the answer was very random, and then I did not want to contest. He says, sir, alag dikhta hai thoda usme. I said, okay, theek hai. Meaning, because I also have that thing that, okay, insurance is going to pay. I did not fight it out. But yes, this happens. So over treatment happens, over billing happens. There's one more area which is happening gradually, and something very interesting is happening. Yes, sometimes it could be possible that you may end up paying lesser because you have insurance than you pay through your own pocket also. These are cases where the insurance company has negotiated lesser rates because of the bulk amount of business finally that they're giving to the hospital.
Okay,
right?
interesting.
And this happens very rarely in India, but I've seen instances where this happens, where the insurance company has been able to strike a deal at a lesser cost than what you would go and pay in cash. Basically. That happens. But it's rare. Largely, the blanket answer to the question is that yes, you could be charged more compared to a regular person who goes and pays cash.
Okay. Thank you, Mahavir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.